Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome. My name is Sadhana, and tonight's tarot chat, I have bit off a rather large topic. And I want to welcome you, and I want to welcome open conversation, and know that this is a conversation that I love to discuss. I like to go deep, and this is just something that has resonated with my curiosity, with my work as a healer, as an intuitive for many, many years. And there have been lots of questions on my channel about Kim Kranz's Archetype deck, and would I do a review around that deck? And I decided that I would start with this conversation because I think it's important that we talk about archetypes in general, and we get just a kind of general feel for, I don't know, the big picture. And so tonight we're going to use Carolyn Myss's Archetype Cards as well as Kim Kranz's Archetype deck. And I hope we can have some fun with this as well tonight. So hi, Jen. Thanks for being here. Yeah, and I'm sure as a psychologist, and many of you I know work as counselors and psychologists, the Archetype cards can really help, and it can be the cards can be something tangible for a client to hold as well too. And so that in itself it's an entry point, right, for a discussion. And I'm happy to put my glasses on. Hello, Michelle. Kezia, hello. Nancy of Kranz Intuition, Soul, Marcella, hi to everyone. So welcome to everybody coming in. Hey there, Paula. I'm good. I'm really good. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about tonight. And this morning, so many things have been going through my mind, and I always have a multitude of things I want to share. And so this is what we're going to do tonight. So I encourage you to pull out your archetype cards, pull out your questions. So just as I wanted to pull a tarot card, maybe 3 tarot cards, just to kind of get a general idea for tonight, the archetype that is going to be kind of overriding this conversation. Because I think that will inform many of the things that I have to say. So the Full Arcos is right there. It's been right there for a while, and I'm still very curious about this deck. And it's moved from my altar to my bedroom and back a couple of times. And I'm ready to shift, definitely ready to shift it, but it's been out for a while. Okay. I don't know where to put all this stuff. I've got a lot of stuff on my table. Only 2 decks and a lot of other things. So there we go. Wow, this is really interesting. So the Wheel of Fortune, I drew a couple of days ago, and it was sitting right there. And I've been staring at it for a couple of days. It's come up again. So, and then we have the 10. Naturally, we have the 10 of Wings. Isn't that interesting? Because when we're talking about archetypes, that's a lot of what comes up is the 10 of Wings energy, the 10 of Air. And then we have the 8 of Coral, which also makes perfect sense. The whole process, right, is about release. So I guess that is no surprise. So I'm just going to leave those cards there. And I'm going to share with you a couple of notes. And I would love to share some of your comments as well tonight too. Wheel of Fortune looks like is a common card. Oh, and yes, if you have other archetype decks, please let me know, because these are the only 2 I have. I think 2 is plenty. And I'm going to share with you the difference between these decks and so forth. I wrote down a few notes, and I'm just going to read them to you. Archetypes encourage us to move beyond the literal, beyond the three-dimensional reality. They are a path. They are a vehicle to deepen our understanding of our human experience. They cannot be understood with the rational waking mind. To work with archetypes, we need to wander into liminal space, to explore the recesses of our being. And I feel that this is why the tarot is such a beautiful medium for working with archetypes, because if we are able to kind of wander into our readings or use the tarot for pathworking, which is where you focus on a single card and you get into a meditative state and you actually enter into conversation with the card or into the space of the card. It's just such a great blend of these two kind of studies. And there's a few experiences I thought I would start with sharing before I go on to the decks. So I teach Yoga Nidra. I'm certified Yoga Nidra, certified, authorized Yoga Nidra teacher, and from a couple of different traditions. Firstly, from Satyananda, and I did 2 very intensive trainings with Satyananda, and that included a lot of neurobiology, and lots of practice and practical applications for very specific Yoga Nidra for very specific things. And whether that was Yoga Nidra for a group of women with eating disorders, or Yoga Nidra for a group of young people who were homeless, or Yoga Nidra for other stressors in people's lives. And so it was an amazing process with a group of people, and that was in the US that I did that. And then with the Amrit Yoga Institute, I studied here actually on the coast of BC at a local yoga center. And this practice of Yoga Nidra was really quite different. And it was much more spiritual, and I was going to say, it's like shot the arrow straight into spirituality. It was less practical and more spiritual, and I loved it. I really loved the methodology. And as my practice began to grow, I decided to go to the first annual International Yoga Nidra Conference in New York last 2019. And there I met Yoga Nidra instructors from all over the world. And I was blown away. I don't know if you can imagine, for 4 or 5 days doing Yoga Nidra 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. It was just the most blissful experience. And it was such a privilege to meet all of these people. And so the reason I'm mentioning Yoga Nidra is that part of the practice of Yoga Nidra, if you haven't ever done it, is, and can be, depends on the style that you're doing, is to practice visualizations. And as a teacher, when you are guiding your students through visualizations, it is very challenging sometimes to choose the visualizations. And this is going to come up as we look at these different archetypes, especially in Kim Kranz's deck, where the archetypes also include, she calls them tools. And the one that came to mind is the rose. So the rose is an archetype, and we all have different, that is often included in the Yoga Nidra visualizations. And there's a bunch of archetypes that are often repeated. And the intention is to take you into your subconscious to heal any patterns connected with the subconscious issues related to that particular archetype. And for a lot of people, the rose or the red rose is a beautiful archetype. It's about beauty. It's about love. It's about, I don't know what the red rose represents for you, but for me, I've never been drawn to red roses. And I associate them as a flower that wilts quickly. And yeah, it's just something that just, it doesn't have this warm, fuzzy connotation for me. And so as a student teacher, I was very, very much aware of the power of archetypes and how archetypes, when they are brought into meditations, can have very, very powerful impact on students. And so it's important to know your students, and this is one of the reasons why teaching yoga online can be very problematic, because you don't really know who's on the other side, even in a Zoom class, because you don't know each other as well. It's not as intimate as meeting people on a regular basis. So that is one of my experiences that I definitely draw on. Another one that we will touch on in a bit later is a workshop that I have done twice. And this is an archetype workshop. It is called You Are Not Who You Think You Are, How to Recognize Archetypal Patterns and Release Karmic Limitations. And during this particular workshop, you go through 12 different levels of archetypes, and there's different archetypes associated with each level. And during each level, there is a release. There is an energetic release, as well as a rescinding of vows. And when I received and was going through Kranz's deck, and I noticed there was a vows card, I had a really good idea, which I will share with you in a little bit, about how to actually use that vows card in a very powerful way. Because in all directions of time, different lifetimes, we probably have made numerous vows. And again, I want to speak to that. And also, what came up for me as I was preparing was the crossover, all the different things that we study in a lifetime, especially if we're interested in this field. And I was thinking of the archetype of the heart, and how very powerful that archetype is, and how it crosses over so many schools of thought. And it's so interesting how it sits at the center of the tree of life as the Sephiro of beauty, and how it sits at the center of the chakra system as the intersection of the upper 3 and lower 3 chakras, and how it sits anatomically pretty much near the center of our body, and why it has shifted a little bit left anatomically is a whole other conversation, but how the heart is considered the center, the pulse. And it's an amazing archetype that is, I don't believe, included in either of the decks that I have on the table tonight. And so those are just a few of my preliminary thoughts. Yeah. So I will, if you have questions for me tonight, I'm going to do my best to keep up with the chat. And I really, really look forward to having a conversation with all of you. So thank you for your lovely comments. All right, so I'm just an introduction to the 2 decks that I have, and Carolyn Myss's deck, I believe. Now I believe it is Myss or Myss, somewhere in, I'm not sure which state she's from. Anyway, Carolyn Myss, I'm going to call her. And her deck, I believe, is 2003. And these are the card backs. And in the description box below, I did put down the name of the artist of the deck. If you have done her program, Sacred Contracts, you will know a lot about this deck. And in Sacred Contracts, she goes through a program where she believes that when we come into this lifetime, we carry 12 archetypes with us. And the first 4 archetypes we all carry are one of the child archetypes, and she divides those into many different child patterns. And the saboteur and the prostitute and the victim, I believe. So yeah, so we carry those 4 archetypes as well as 8 other ones. And those first 4 archetypes that we all carry, they inform our relationship, I believe, with our root chakra. They inform our relationship with fear and how we manage fear and how we manage our family circle and all of those issues related to survival. And with her program, you have a myriad of chakras. Sorry, not chakras. You have a myriad of archetypes that you glance over. You can peruse the book. You can go through the index. If you have the card deck, you can lay all of the cards out. And then she encourages you to slowly, one by one, choose 8 other archetypes. And much like when you choose crystals, I believe she says in her book that you know intuitively which archetypes you are working with in this lifetime. And then there's various exercises you go through the course of however long you're going to do this program, and you work with these 12 archetypes. And it's a healing program. This deck of cards is not intended to be an oracle deck. It's intended to work side by side with her workshops and with her program. And I have used it in many, many different ways. You've heard me talk about my past life readings that I do. So when I do a past life reading, I would always have either a pile of cards from an archetype deck, because it is just, it's part of that experience. It's part of our experience of the patterns that we're moving through. And it can really powerfully help to let us, to talk to the other cards in the reading. Okay, so Kim Kranz's deck. So I'll go back. In Carolyn's deck, there are about 74 cards, and all of the cards are, I've got a pile of S's here. All of the cards are related to self. So here in the S's, you can see we have Samaritan, servant, saboteur, slave. I can't read upside down. Scribe, student, not upside down, but backwards. And this one is storyteller. So in this deck, all 74 of the cards are related to self and the journey of self, which is a little different than in the Wild Unknown archetype cards. In the Wild Unknown archetype, there are 30 self cards, which we're going to look at in a moment, and I'm going to compare the 2 decks. And there are 20 place cards. So the place cards include things like the desert and the mountain and the cave and the box and various things like that. So when we're experiencing archetypes are not just aspects of our character, of ourself. Archetypes can be things like the heart, the rose, and the cave, for sure. And when I was commenting at the beginning, I said, this is not something our rational mind can wrap its head around. How many of you have worked with mediums? Mediums do this all the time. They say things like, well, my symbol for such and such is a feather, and I see 3 feathers now. Or my symbol for abundance is gold coins, and there are gold coins just falling over your head or something like that. So to drift into a liminal space and to trust your clairvoyance and your clairsentience is, I feel, a crucial part of this process. Yeah. So in her deck, we have, hello, Ange. Hey, Neem. Oh, why are you losing your mind, Neem? I hope you are okay. So 30 self cards, 20 place cards, 20 tools, which we'll also look at. And then she had the final 8 cards in the archetype, well-known archetype deck are the trump cards. And these are big, big cards that would equate to the amplitude of the major arcana. And so one of the things that we'll look at is dividing up the deck and how to work with the deck divided up into suits. Okay, so does that sound good? I hope we can get through all of this. So I'm going to go through the first 30 cards of the Wild Unknown and just kind of talk about how these 2 decks cross over. So the first archetype is the mother. The great mother, the feminine, the divine feminine, the source. And I think it's really beautiful that this is the first card. There is no 0 card in the Wild Unknown archetypes. If I say Wild Unknown, I'm referring to the Wild Unknown archetype deck. There's no 0 card. It starts with the number 1, and number 1 is the mother. And in the guidebook, which is excellent, she discusses why there's no hero card. She discusses how she went about choosing the archetypes, because an archetype deck could have 30,000 cards, and it's a matter of somehow choosing the ones that want to be in the deck. And I'm sure you've heard lots of deck creators, when they're creating animal decks, the process they go through in choosing which animals need to appear in a deck. And so here we have just a small number of archetypes. So you have Jen, if you look at Jen's last comment, she has done this. And so if you separate Kim's deck into the 4 suits, and you draw 1 card from the initiations, 1 card from the tools, 1 card from the places, 1 card from the selves, it's a really beautiful way to work with that. Okay, so the next one is the father, and both decks include the father. The great father, the masculine, the protector. And interestingly, in yogic teachings, the divine mother refers to also all that is manifest in this world. So Prakriti is also called Prakriti. So the trees and the flowers and the animals and the table and the cards are all Shakti. They're all divine feminine. And what is divine masculine is the unseen. And in yogic terms, masculine and feminine refers to the fact that one cannot exist without the other. Much like in this manifest world, we cannot create without the other. One cannot exist without the other. And whole other conversation. The third one is child divine. And I will show you in Caroline Myss's book, she says that we all carry the child, we all have the child archetype that we are working with in our, just going to grab her little guidebook here. And there are several different childs that we work with. And for sure, I know which one mine is. It's very easy. Mine is the abandoned, the orphan child, adopted at birth, wounded child, abandoned child or orphan child, magical innocent child, nature child, eternal child, dependent child. And there are a few others. And so in working with her deck, not all of them have a card, but these are, you would choose one of these if you were kind of choosing your inner child card. And then we go to, both decks have the eternal child. So the eternal child refers to the child of joy, the child that is connected to the greater consciousness. It's like that, you know, those children, that old soul kind of energy. That's what that one refers to. And then both decks have the orphan. And it's really interesting artwork for the orphan on this card. So, okay, I'm going to put these here and put those there. And then we have the mentor. And not every deck, not every card is in the Carolyn Myss deck. So mentor, we also have a teacher card. So there is replication of a lot of the cards. You can find cards that embody more than one archetype. You can find archetypes that kind of do the same thing. Then we have the poet. And I just wanted to comment on some of these. I just want to go back one step just so this is really clear what some of these are. So the orphan also refers to the beggar, the abandoned, and the wounded child, which is another card in the red deck. The mentor is the teacher, the sage, and the guru, and the poet is the artist, the witness, and the truth teller. And I think that's a beautiful interpretation of that. And then we go to the virgin or the maiden. And in this deck, there is not a card for the crone that I can match up. So that I thought that was interesting. There's also a secret card, which fits in with that archetype as well, too. Okay. And hunter. So hunter-gatherer is an archetype card that appears in a lot of the shamanic decks. And this is a beautiful pairing to work with if it comes up in a reading, the hunter-gatherer. The warrior is an archetype that I work with all the time, being a yoga teacher. And working with the Bhagavad Gita. So hunter is also the seeker, the pursuer, and the predator, and the warrior is the samurai, the soldier, also the advocate. Queen. And I think it's really interesting how there's a lot of celebrities, there's people in our tarot tube that use this archetype in their name as well. This is the Empress, the Mother, Queen, and the Sovereign. And then the counterpart, the King, the Emperor, the Ruler, the Commander, the Commander-in-Chief. And we do have a crone card in this deck. And I haven't been able to find a pair for that. I don't feel there's a direct pair for that. Both decks have the Judge. And this deck also has the Advocate. And the Advocate was mentioned in another card. I just said that was the samurai, right? The Judge. The Shapeshifter. I just think it's really interesting that we have the same archetype. A lot of them in this card. Now the Shapeshifter has two cards in this deck, the Trickster. And I know in the mystical shaman, I believe it is the mystical shaman, we have both of these archetypes as well too, the Shapeshifter and the Trickster. And we have the shaman and the healer. the Lover, and the Siren. And in this older deck, it's referred to as the Femme Fatale. And I'll just want to share with you what Kim says about the Siren. The Temptress, the Seducer, and the Femme Fatale. And in the other deck, there is also the Don Juan. And then we go to the Animal. And I'm thinking of the Mystical Shaman. One of the things I like about that deck are all of the archetypes it brings up, because it has the Wild Woman card, and I believe there's another Wild Woman energy kind of card. So it's really, this is a very powerful archetype that is not included in the Carolyn Myss deck. And then we go to, okay, so here's a conversation that we could have. In this deck, we have the Pilgrim. And the Pilgrim refers to the one who is on a spiritual pilgrimage. So they're on a journey seeking enlightenment. I'm pretty sure that's what Kim's take is on this card. And there is no Pilgrim card in the other deck, which is interesting because it has 74 souls. But what it does have is the Pioneer. But to me, the energy of the Pilgrim and the Pioneer is quite different. There is, in the energy of the Pioneer, she has the light attribute, is a passion for doing and creating what has not been done before. And the shadow is the compulsive need to keep moving on. With the Pioneer archetype too, there's also, I can feel with the Pioneer archetype this survival, almost like a lot of sympathetic nervous system stuff coming up with the Pioneer archetype. It feels, yes, there's a sense of adventure, but I think the intention with the Pilgrim and the intention with the Pioneer is quite different. So let me know what you think about that, because okay, so Shamanic Medicine card says Trickster and Shapeshifter. Good to know. Pioneer is kind of Aries energy. Yes. Isn't that interesting? That is interesting, because being the first sign of the zodiac as well too, and that the other thing too with the Pioneer is this need to make things better and to mean more. Like this is also embodies the energy of the immigrant, right? The emigrant. The emigrant. Okay. I just want to finish these 30, and then we'll go on to the we're almost done. And then we have the Mystic, which is right up our alley. And the Creator. So in Wild Unknown, it's referred to as the Creator. And we have a couple different Creator cards in this deck, the Artist and the Alchemist. And so when you see, or we also have the Poet. So the Artist light attribute on the Myss deck is expressing a dimension of life that is just beyond the 5 senses, inspiring others to see life symbolically. the artist is so deeply connected to archetypes, and I think the artist archetype is also a vehicle for embracing the archetypes. It's and one of the exercises I'm going to suggest and talk about is just exactly that, is to find your inner artist. The alchemist is a little different, right? The alchemist is shifting. It's more like the energy of the magician, isn't it? Perhaps a little bit like temperance, but a lot like the magician. Okay. Now I would like to just for a moment talk about these three cards: the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. So you may know that Kim Kranz is a yogi, and this is one of the trifectors in the yogic teachings. So we have Brahma, who is the creator, and Shiva is the destroyer, and Vishnu, who is the sustainer. And in all of the yogic teachings, we go through these periods and these cycles, and the energy of Brahma represents when things are being created. And then we go through periods where things are sustained, and that's Vishnu energy, and Shiva is the destroyer. And so when I was looking at the other deck, I was thinking, well, are there other names that you could associate with the creator? So the creator could also be related to the mother. The creator could be related to the parent, right? The mother and the father. Could be also to, of course, to the artist. But what about the sustainer? Is there a self archetype that you are more familiar with that that feels like the sustainer? I don't have the answer to this question, and so I'm asking you because I'm totally familiar with this as a yogic principle, but not as a like a Jungian, from a Jungian philosophy. So I want to go to the sustainer in her book. The sustainer is the peacemaker, the upholder, and the preserver. The sustainer works behind the scenes, tending to the tasks of life. They cultivate gardens, they pay bills, they keep the meals warm and the mouths sweetly fed. The sustainer is at peace in the process of life, knowing there is no start or finish to the humble yet meaningful tasks. They have a natural inclination to nourish others, to archive, to preserve Earth's resources, to consider environmental impact, and to see their role in the divine cycle of life. It is common for the sustainer to become overworked, leading to resentment. Their tasks aren't glamorous, and therefore the sustainer rarely receives the credit or attention. The sustainer longs to uphold things in place so badly, especially relationships, that they resist necessary change and take time. So take time with this archetype. It was within us all and needs our love. So my question is, what's the difference between the sustainer and the caretaker? Is the sustainer the caretaker in shadow? And remember, these names that are being assigned to these archetypes are that they're just random names. So let me know what your thoughts are on the sustainer and the caretaker. The caretaker sounds like motherhood. I'm just going to go back. Jen's comment's still there. One of the things that when I was reading that came up for me are those who are so devoted and passionate in protecting the earth and sustaining the earth. And in what came to mind were some young people who have created ways to clean up all of the, I don't even know what you call them, the pods of garbage in the oceans and things like that. So the sustainer. So we have the Brahma, the creator, the sustainer, and then we have the destroyer. And the destroyer is not necessarily a negative thing. The destroyer is there so we can move on. The destroyer archetype is about burning through things that no longer serve. So can you think of examples of the destroyer in the, not in shadow, but the destroyer in light? And how do we manage that? And sometimes we resent and we resist the destroyer, even though we know the destroyer is good for us. You know what's coming to my mind? For me, divorce. 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 And I wonder, you know, divorce, that word, but there's another kind of energy to that, was a destroyer, but it was a beautiful, it created something amazing. So let me know. I'm going to read, I'll read it to you a little bit from the destroyer, and then there's just a few more. It has necessary yet painful work to do in the world. We have an aversion to these endings, which is what I just said. This destroyer pulls the rug out from underneath relationships, jobs, homes, and forms of security. Doesn't the destroyer sound a lot like the Tower card? But the Tower needs to happen because we didn't take care of things ourselves. We weren't listening to the signs. We weren't paying attention, right? So the destroyer steps in. It's the part of us that wants things to end. Its painful orientation is to uncover our true purpose. Ooh, that is a good one. I want to write that down. Its painful orientation is to uncover our true purpose. This destroyer does not let us linger long in comforts, as it knows not much happens in that realm. With its piercing eyes, it seeks out stagnancy from a distance, and the rest becomes history. In the old myths, this is the moment when heads begin to roll, the ground opens up, the castles crumble. So, the destroyer as a person. The destroyer as a person in light versus the destroyer as a person in shadow, because in shadow that's pretty easy to identify. Yes, also like the death card in tarot. That's a good point too. Therapist as destroyer. Destroyer of false illusions. Destroyer of illusion, delusion. Okay, let's go on. I think we did that one already. Okay. And then we have the comic and the fool. How many of you, when you're doing tarot readings, ever see the fool as the comic, as the jester? What in a reading would lead you in the direction of the light or the shadow, of the comic versus the new beginning, the start of an adventure? What would be surrounding cards that would lead you more to the archetype of the comic or the jester? Right? I want to know what you think about that one. And then we have God and the unseen. which is a beautiful discussion you could have. And then Kim has the shadow as a separate archetype. And this card, I believe we could definitely pull out as a significator, along with a few other cards that I'm going to suggest working with separately. I don't know if we're at the, are we at the end here? I don't want to go on. Yes, and I think there's two more. And the other two self cards are the self and the one. And the self really refers to the, what's the word in, the witness, the witness. So have you ever had that experience when you are kind of just drifting with your thoughts and you're wondering who is actually doing the thinking? Who is, have you ever had that experience where you just got just far enough and you've actually been able to feel like there's another part of me and it really is there? And to experience that capital S self can be just so mind blowing. I love it when that happens in meditation. Yes, the Divine Muses is an amazing archetype deck. I could have pulled that out tonight. That is great deck. I love that deck. Okay. So where I thought I would go now is to just talk about how I work with these decks. So I use them in past life readings as part of a spread. And the archetype deck is shuffled and then one card is drawn from that along with other oracle and tarot decks. So that's one way that I use these cards. The next thing I want to suggest is that I don't want to shuffle these. Oh, maybe I can shuffle the other deck. I guess I can. Why not? The next thing I would suggest is when you're working with these decks is to either randomly or intentionally choose a card, which I'm going to do right now. And take that card to be you, to be, I'm just having this random thought. I don't know how many of you read Carrie Mallon's blog about the Emperor and the number 4. I'm going to try to circle around to that because I would love to address that blog because it kind of ties into this as well too. So to randomly or intentionally choose, because if you're working through something, you could choose the one that is resonating with you at this time, but I'm just going to randomly pick one. And then the first step is to think about me and how this, okay, so if you can do this exercise with me, that would be amazing. So I'm going to just read to you the light and the shadow of the Messiah. So the light attribute is serving humanity with humility. And the shadow attribute is exaggerated belief that you are the only means through which a cause can succeed. So reflecting on your self, your little s self, and your capital S self, how do you see the Messiah in your life? I'm just going to add a couple more words here from the guidebook. And I can also show you the guidebook in case you're interested. This deck is still available. So in the guidebook, you don't get too much. information. It's associated with embodiment of divine power and a mission to save humanity. Tends to become obsessed with spiritual purpose, convinced that God needs him, her to do something. Shadow Messiah is convinced of his divine mission and becomes obsessed with to the points of psychosis, like Jim Jones and Charles Manson. Look for a long-term desire to save people, especially in large numbers, with the possibility of self-delusion in this regard. So in the light, it could also be, well, the Redeemer or the Savior could be light or shadow. So to focus on this as me. How do you see this as yourself? And then, sorry, I should have done a pretty diagram for you. And in your journal, this is my diagram here, create a next circle. So we're creating concentric circles. In the next circle, put family, partner, and work. And ask yourself, with the card that you've chosen, how is this archetype showing up at work? How is this particular archetype informing my choices at work and with my family and with my partner? And I have found that working with either circles work for me rather than different shapes of diagrams. I like the circles. It also speaks to the shadow side of each of the archetypes, having you in the center, right? It speaks to ego. And then to keep building the circle out. So there might be something apparent in your community. There might be this altruism with a particular organization that you're volunteering for. You know, like only I can possibly run this workshop because da-da-da-da-da. Or maybe you are going to it from the viewpoint of selfless service. So expand out into the community. And then expand out and look at what's going on in the politics of your community or the politics of your province or state or your territory, your country, and in the world. And this exercise, especially if this is something that resonates with you, when you pull it, it's like, oh yeah, I could really do some work around this. It's really beautiful if you can start to either diagrammatically or through journaling begin to expand and start to see the in and the out, the micro and the macro, and allow the macro to grow little by little by little, because that takes practice. It's very hard at first to see the macro and the micro and the micro and the macro and to see the relationship between that. But this exercise it's a great thing to do when you draw, if you're going to work with this type of a deck. So that's two, the second way. The third thing that I love to do is to embrace the archetype of the artist and to go to the garage and get out my paints. And I do have watercolor paper, I do have watercolor paints, and to allow myself to paint in my journal. I prefer that rather than pencil crayons or pastels. Watercolor is the medium that I feel the most freedom in, but to actually bring in the metaphor, the layers, the symbology of the archetype into a drawing or a painting, and to allow and to not edit it at all. Just to be in that as part of your healing, as part of your journey, and to be brave enough to do that, even if that's not your thing, because there's really something magical in the creative. Maybe it's going to be a collage. We can all cut and paste and create, but there's something because collaging can be a little more structured. And so my intention with this one is that you really kind of get into that lost space. It could also be through something like poetry. So you could write a poem about the Messiah if that was your card. And if you are able to find poetry around that, something could be revealed through the poetry. And music. So if there is music that is associated, so suppose you picked a card that had music that you found, like with this one, I would just start playing the Messiah and listening to that music and seeing how that made me feel. And maybe I would try to sit quietly and meditate with the Messiah playing. Does this make sense? I hope this makes sense. And so what if you were working with the warrior archetype, and there's lots of music in the lyrics that talks about the fighting and the struggle, and I can think of some that I used to teach aerobics to, right? And to allow the energy of the music and the words and the lyrics to grow and to expand the archetype. So this is just a multi-sensory way to explore the archetype. And then the next one, of course, is to path work, to meditate. And if you have never done this before, you want to start with something very short. And I strongly recommend you can set a timer on your phone, because usually the first time you sit down, it's like, oh my God, how long have I been sitting here? I can't do this. My mind is so busy. And you're listening to all the sounds in the house. You can also do it as you go to bed at night. And so what you do is you start to focus on your breath. You could do a kind of a soporific meditative guided meditation as you hold your card, and then you connect with the imagery on the card. And you start to blur your vision a little bit. You can have a conversation if there's a person in the card, and you just speak, or you can, if you're attracted to the background of the card, and you begin to enter into it. Pathworking is a beautiful thing to do with archetypes, because it can leave you in a very, it can reveal a lot. The other similar one too is if you've never done shamanic journeying, there are lots of recordings on YouTube and different places where there are 15, 20, 30-minute journeying recordings. And some of them, if you've never done it before, I would look for one that brings you out. So the person who's doing the drumming or somebody in that group brings you back awake again. So you just don't stay in your journey. And so you can take your archetype and take it with you on your journey. And the pulse and the beat of the drumming is so beautiful. It's a wonderful way to explore archetypes. I'm going to go back and look at some of your comments. And I never, maybe the Page of Wands. I was asking, I just going back to the Fool. And she says she sees him as naive. So let's go to Annette's question. Shadow work. If you're doing it with clients, a client that you are familiar with, the thing about archetypes is that, and I was just touched on this when I was talking about Yoga Nidra at the beginning of our time together. I'm just looking at the time to see where we're at. Is that you need to know your client well. And maybe Jen, you can chime in on this, or any of you that work as psychologists or psychiatrists. It can be too much too soon. So not ever in a first reading, maybe in a third time together, in a third session. you get to know people and you get to know what they're hiding. You get to know or get a feeling for what is underneath, or what you suspect is underneath their tension, underneath their stress, underneath the questions that keep coming up over and over again. And so that's the beauty of working with the same person, you know, every month or something like that, because then you can go there. Or if you work with them in different modalities, sometimes after I've done a Reiki treatment, I will do a reading with someone, and on their second visit, I will go to a place like that. And often I can pick up on that energetically as well too. So the archetypes come through clairvoyantly, right? So I see the symbols, or I can feel what that archetype is, or I can feel when my hands are in certain parts of the body. Oh, okay, this is related to da 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 da. And so in working with shadow work, a great deal of compassion and sensitivity is needed. I don't think there's a place for that in quick 15-minute readings or anything like that. And if you are doing this for yourself, of course, yes, go for it. And it can really help, because the shadow, there is a shadow. Every single archetype has a light side and has a shadow. And it's like every tarot card has a light side and has a shadow. So that's my long answer to a short question. Who plays the Messiah? Swan. I play the Messiah on the 12th night of... beautiful. All right. We'll see you, Sol. Thanks for being here. Okay. So some of you are chiming in on the rapport. Yes, the rapport and trust definitely needs to be established first. Right? And everybody's different, right? Some people will open up right away and others will hide things for a long time. Yeah, a healing session. An hour or longer. This is not quick. Exactly. When people go to my, when people ask for a, what do? I do the shamanic spread. It's a healing spread really that I do. And I let people know that if they want to do that, it's not a quick reading and they need to book in for a longer session, because invariably something deep is going to come to the surface. All right. Another way to work with these decks is to use them as a study. And what I would do is pull out, I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it with all of them. So for example, the warrior card is on top here, and to go through and pull out all of the tarot cards that you associate with this archetype. So if you're thinking about the warrior in shadow and the warrior in light, there could be a lot of cards that you pull out for the warrior card. And then have a look at that. It's a really good exercise. The goddess card could be seen in so many different tarot cards, right? Including the empress and the queens, and you might see the goddess also in the star card. And this is a beautiful way to reflect the bully. The bully. What tarot card do you see the bully in? I can think of a couple that come to mind. Right? And the bully could be the shadow of many cards. The bully could be the shadow of the emperor, right? So here's one. This comes up. So the addict, The addict could be the devil. The addict could come up in temperance. The addict could come up in the Nine of Cups. If you look at the shadow of the Nine of Cups, where else would you see the addict? Or the other ones that I've pulled up. Yeah, so if you want to chime in on any of these, sometimes there's quite a lapse with the chat. So just it's really interesting. Like the damsel. Which tarot card would you see the damsel? Understanding the nature of healthy romance inspires you to rely on yourself is the light, and the shadow is waiting for the night to provide you seduction by romantic illusion. And maybe the damsel would be, it would depend on the surrounding cards. And so this is another reason why you could use these cards even in a general reading. So you're not necessarily focusing on shadow, and you could draw this as a central, draw one of these cards as a central card. Annette is still learning. You keep going. It's so much fun, Annette. Queen of Cups. Okay, so I feel it's a brilliant exercise to go through. I want to go back, and I was talking about the tools in Kim's deck. And the tools, I need to go to the table of contents. Can you imagine hand lettering her guidebooks? It's really something. So I'm just going to go here, and I'm just going to scan through the tools. I'm just going to read through them really quickly. So they are the flame, the tear, the riddle, the vow, the vision, the gem, the ring, the nectar, medallion, kiss, mask, sword, venom, offering, prayer, seed, stone, mirror, vessel, and thread. The little kind of nugget I wanted to share with you tonight was the vow. And I'm sharing this with you from that workshop I referred to earlier on. And this is what came up for me when I saw this card I'm going to find the card for you in the deck. Here it is. It's right here. So the imagery of this card looks really quite beautiful. What if this card was the significator? And you had a sense, and again, this would be like a karmic reading. This would be, what is it I need to release? What is it that is holding me back? You know, that kind of reading. In this workshop, as we moved through these 12 different layers, we rescinded vows for many of these archetypes. So for example, the healer's vow. And I'm just going to read this to you. This is what we said. If in any lifetime, I or anyone on my behalf made a vow or a promise preventing the personal use or benefit of spiritual healing energies, I hereby rescind such vows or promises now and for all time. So if you were prevented from using herbs or magic or even surgery because of the culture that you were in that particular lifetime, and you made a vow never to use it, the energy of that vow could still be with you. And so this is a practice of releasing that vow and so that you are free and clear. And part of the understanding of this workshop is that we need to be cognizant, we need to feel and to understand and to close our eyes and drift into liminal space, that time is a spiral. Time moves in all directions. I'll give you a couple other examples. The vow, well, some of these are really long. I'm going to just give you short examples. So what if you had given in some lifetime a vow of chastity as a monk or as a nun somewhere thousands of years ago? And what if you were struggling with your sexual relationship with your partner, that you just couldn't get comfortable, something had gone wrong, you were just feeling you were struggling with that. And perhaps in the cards, or perhaps in your heart even, you knew, but you needed a tarot reading. And so you had the vow card in the center, and the cards around it came up with cards that indicated relationship, passion, love, sex. And so maybe that's all you need to do, is to release that vow of chastity, to free yourself. And I want to tell you, this particular workshop was exhausting. It was exhausting. The first time I did it, I couldn't get through all 12. I was a wreck. My head was pounding. My body was shaking. It was truly remarkable. The second time I did it, I got through all 12 of them, but it was amazing. So what if in a lifetime you gave a vow of poverty? What if you rescinded all of your worldly possessions and you vowed to live in poverty? And what if the energy of that vow of poverty was still with you? What if you had still carried that into this particular lifetime? And so when I saw this card, I thought, wow, the vow as an archetype is super powerful. And perhaps for some of you, you have done workshops, you have done different things with different clients, or, different times in your life, and not seen certain exercises as an archetype that you can expand on. And anyway, this is one that really hit home with me. So let me know what you think about that. And I think the last thing that I want to share tonight is, I could go on and talk about this for hours and hours, but I do have to eat. I would like to eat supper. And if you would like to do a part 2 to this, if you could write your questions in the description, in the comments below, let me know where you would like to go with this. If you want to actually do some specific readings, I'm happy to carry on the discussion. So the final thing I think is important to bring clarity around is, what's the difference between stereotypes and archetypes? The difference between stereotypes and archetypes. And it is a question that Kim addresses in her guidebook. And I think it's a really important one to spend some time with, especially when we're easy to say, oh yeah, I've dealt with that one. Because I feel that all of these archetypes are with all of us all the time. And the ones that rise to the surface and slap us in the face are the ones we need to take seriously and to deal with. And so if we are quick to judge, if we're quick to dismiss, then we're missing a big lesson. And so I really feel the restriction of stereotypes, and perhaps perhaps you draw one of these cards and it comes up and you're very quick to go, oh yeah, I've dealt with that. You know, I get that in readings a lot. I'll do my scan, my empathic scan, and I will something really challenging came up the other day, and and I could just feel the pain, so much pain in the querent across the table. This was a face-to-face reading, and I started to ask a few questions, and I could see the emotions rising to the surface. And she shared with me what had happened. And right away, she wanted to shut it down. She wanted to say, oh, yeah, but I've dealt with it. I've dealt with that. I thought I dealt with it. And so I kept encouraging that to come forward. But that's not really my point here. So okay, so let's use this as an example. So the pain was abortion. The pain was abortion. And so what if abortion is an archetype. And what if we have a judgment around it rather than ability to explore it? And all I want to say here is that stereotypes and judgments are constricting. We want it to end. We want to cut it off. We know it. We get in that know-it-all attitude. But archetypes are so expansive and they're so full of wisdom. And so when you feel that curious mind, when you feel that wanting to explore and to expand and to understand and to meditate and to read or to listen to classical music, you know you're in you're in the world of archetypes. And when you are in that judgmental, quick to dismiss mood, that you are not. And I just offer this because I feel that sometimes when some of these cards come up, that's what we want to do. We want to shut them down now. We want to shut them down right away. I referred to Carrie Mallon's blog, and she was talking about the Emperor card, and she was reflecting on the energy of the Emperor and how now in October, almost the end of the year, in this 2020 year, being a 4-year with the Emperor. So she shared some of her thoughts on the Emperor. And after I read that, I went back and looked at my year ahead reading and was reflecting on my card for 2020. And I just want to say lastly that it's important to go back and to continue to try to expand and grow through these readings that we do earlier in the year, that we don't just do it then and forget about it. So I would encourage all of you to reflect on the Emperor as an archetype, personally and in your family and your community and your country, just like I was drawing that circle, and also to reflect on the archetype of your card for 2020, not only within yourself, but how that is being mirrored back. Okay. So thank you. And yeah, so part 2 would be really fun. I would, Nancy, I don't know if I said hello to you. Welcome. And anybody else I didn't say hi to, I'm sorry. There was no intention of leaving you out. I would love to do a part 2. I just need some prompts. So if you can put your questions below, and then we can kind of carry on with this, and let me know what you need and where you would like to expand, and if you would rather do it more like exercises. And I'd also be happy to do a Zoom session on this as well too. I love working with this kind of energy, and we could actually go through and do some exercises. That would be fun. So thank you. Thank you for being here and indulging. You know, I feel also, you know, this is indulgent, me sharing all my stuff, and it's very one-sided. So thank you. I appreciate it. I will hopefully see you all soon. See you proverbially, of course, on YouTube. And I look forward to chatting with you in the comments below. Namaste.